Do you want to be more effective on your coyote stands? What you're doing wrong, you probably think has something to do with your calling or your shooting, when really it has everything to do with what you did before you started. I'm going to go over in this video key elements to be more successful on a coyote stand. And what you're going to find at the end is I'm going to explain why everything you do before you turn the call on is more important than anything you do after you turn the call on. I believe stand setup is one of the most underestimated or undervalued parts of a coyote stand. So if you think about it, when you go into a stand and everything you do, you look back afterwards and you say, I wonder why that stand didn't produce. A lot of the times it produced and you don't know it. Meaning, there's many times in night hunting and often in day hunting that we call in a coyote, we never see it. Why don't we see all of the coyotes that we call in? A lot of times it's because we didn't take the stand setup from a scientific approach or a canine behavior approach. So as many of you know, I've spent 30 years as a police canine handler, as a police canine trainer, and I am now a full-time professional predator hunter. So I look at everything from a behavior standpoint. When you're setting up your coyote stand, if you would look at things from the coyote's perspective, it is greatly going to help your stand setup. So what do I mean by that? The general rule of thumb is for day hunting, the sun to your back and the wind to your face. Or for night hunting, you want elevation and you want the wind in your face. And that is a great starting point. If you want to be more successful, we really need to take it about 3 steps past that. So what we want to look at is in our stand setup, from the coyote's perspective, how can I make it comfortable to come in? How can I create an environment so when I'm setting up in my stand, how can I create an environment out in front of me that is going to be inviting to that coyote to come in? So we've been hitting open ground so far today and it hasn't produced as well as we'd like. So we're going to mix it up. We're in like a river bottom floodplain area with pretty heavy cover. So we've grabbed the rifle and the shotgun. I'm going to throw the call out here. As you can see, it's not very far at all, but we want the call within shotgun range. So if this stand produces, it's going to be close and it's going to be quick. So that's why we're putting the call really close and trying to set up our arena to happen right in front of us. So we'll see if it works. I don't mind a headwind or the wind in my face. What I prefer is a crosswind. And the reason for that is I really want to be able to watch my downwind side without spinning around completely behind me. If I have to turn around 180 degrees to check my downwind side, I'm changing the whole way that stand is set up. If I'm calling a crosswind, I'm intending on shooting, let's say 45 degrees to my left. But I can check my downwind side 45 degrees to my right, which gives me a 90-degree change in my stand, if that makes sense. If I'm calling directly into the wind and I want to check my downwind side, 90 degrees, I'm turning around completely. So people will say, well, by calling in a crosswind and having your stand at 45 degrees, you're eliminating half your stand. And they are correct. But you set your, remember what I said at the very beginning of the video, you're setting your stand up to be successful. So if I call where I want to put my coyotes the arena. So when I set up my arena, I want the coyotes to come into an area that's comfortable, and I want to create paths in. So if I have a pasture and the wind is coming to my left, I'm going to set up elevation. To me is the most important. I want a high point. I'm in Oklahoma. I've got kind of rolling hills and little canyons and things that create a lot of cover for the coyotes. So just 5 or 10 feet of grade elevation helps me immensely. So when I have that elevation and say the wind is coming from my left, I'll pick a part of the pasture that will have a fence row or some plum thickets or something of cover coming in. Coyotes don't want to be exposed. So when I first started hunting, I would pick the most wide open area that I could see for miles on each side. And it produced. But what I got was a lot of coyotes hanging up in a 300 to 400 yard range. At that time, I wasn't comfortable shooting much past 300 yards. So I felt like they were hanging up at my limit. Now that I'm comfortable shooting to 450, sometimes I'll get them to hang up at 500, 550. But when I go back and analyze those, my comfort level of shooting had nothing to do with it. It all had to do with that's all the further comfortable the coyotes felt coming in. And then I had created an arena that gave them what they felt was too much exposure. So when they feel too exposed, they're going to skirt the lines with a fence row, with plum thickets, sage, any kind of brush, any kind of cover that if they feel a little bit of danger, they can dip in that cover and feel safer or concealed. We pulled into a well location and I saw one. You can see how thick this cover is? And a lot of people pass this stuff by not wanting to hunt in it because if you're not playing the grade, it's really hard to see. But man, this is money for coyotes. So when we're setting up our arena, we want a kill area. And an important part to this is that kill area doesn't need to be a whole lot bigger than what you're comfortable shooting.
See what we can do here. We're fighting high winds. We're supposed to have high winds tomorrow. Evidently they've moved in today. So old Onyx says 15 miles an hour and Mike and I think it's more like 25, 30, gusting 30 at least. So we're gonna see what we can do in this wind.
So I'm going to do a whole nother episode on equipment and that type of thing. But one of the things that I covered in that was you have to know your effective range. If you're a 200-yard shooter, then there's nothing wrong with setting up your stands for a 200-yard kill. But don't set up, I set up a stand for a 350-yard comfort zone. If you're a 150-yard shooter, don't set up a stand like I do with a 350-yard shooting zone. So set it up to your skill level or comfort level for your shooting zone. And you may push in past 500 yards of good area behind you to create that 250-yard area. Hopefully that makes sense. So now you've got that set up. You're working the wind to your advantage, a crosswind, or the wind into your face, or any variation of. So I really like about a 45-degree crosswind if I can set it up right. Now people say, well, you're getting awful picky. Well, if I can determine which way the wind's coming, I can set that wind up exactly the way I want. So the difference between a 90-degree crosswind and a 45-degree crosswind is me simply taking everything the way I have it set up and moving it slightly to the side. Which leads me to my next point, placement of the call. So when you set that arena up, you're going to have call placement is extremely important. Where you put the call and then what direction the call is facing is two different things. So where I place the call is where I want to draw that coyote into the arena. Think of sound. I've talked about in my other videos, I really get into odor with having a drug dog and a bomb dog background. Odor and how odor moves and that type of thing is very interesting to me. So I always say, think of odor like smoke. The higher the wind, the narrower your scent cone, the longer it goes. Sound is very similar. So I usually use an X24 call. I have other calls. I have the new X360, but I really like the X24. The reason is because I want one speaker, and that speaker, that sound goes out in a cone, very similar to the way odor goes downwind. So I want to project that sound in a cone, in a distance, just like a coyote howling in one direction. When I set up an arena, I usually set up, I want the coyote to be right here. Now, if I want the coyote to be right here, I'm going to set my call 40 yards, 50 yards, upwind of that. Then the direction I place the call is the avenue I want to bring them in. So they're going to swing in downwind of the sound or that cone that I'm projecting, right? So if I have a 45-degree wind, and let's say I'm set up directly towards the camera in front of me, I would place the call 40 to 50 yards to my left, and that should draw them in right in front of me. Which way I point the call is kind of like the road or the avenue they take. And then that, depending on the wind, that 20, 30, 40 yard area downwind of the call, that's like the intersection I want to pull up. I want them to pull up and stop at that intersection. And at that point, they're really going to start to make a turn and start to work directly into that sound source. Something else to keep in mind is, and a huge question, do I leave the call on or do I turn the call off when they get close? I personally prefer to only shoot at coyotes that are standing still. I don't want to say I never miss. Everybody misses shots. But when you're doing contract predator management on the same ranches every night, you cannot educate these coyotes. Everything that comes into the call must be killed to be effective and not educate them. So I bark stop most of the coyotes or wait for them to naturally stop and take them there. If multiples come in, and this is getting a little bit off track, but if multiples come in, say 3 come in, I'll shoot the furthest one first, the second furthest one second, and the closest one third. That's just so I can have that, keep them all in that arena and kind of that buffer zone. But do you turn the call off or not? I let the call play, and here's the reason why. Coyotes use all of their senses. The sense that they depend on the most is their sense of smell. Then they like to use their ears and then their eyes. And I think their eyes and ears are pretty close to each other. If they see you or they hear you, they're going to put that at equal value and they're going to roll out. So when we're calling, we are making that coyote believe that their ears are giving them the information they want. I heard a howl in this distance. And it is amazing how I can see a coyote at 800-900 yards. I can howl one time and be patient, and that coyote will come within 50 yards of where that call is. They have an uncanny ability to know, to be able to source a sound. But when the coyote's coming in, he's using his ears, right? So he's coming in, he's depending on his ears to give him the information he wants. He's also using his nose, but his ears told him what he needs. The reason I leave the call play is because if I take that sound away, now they've come in, they heard something, they heard vocals, they heard a fight, they heard food, whatever, they're coming in. All of a sudden that stops. Now what that tells the coyote is, my ears have failed me and I need to go to one of my other senses. So what they're going to do is, that you'll see them, especially in a good thermal, you'll see them, they'll put their nose up, they'll really start smelling, and then they're going to start looking. Like, I don't hear anything, but I'm going to try to see what I can see, and hopefully I can smell something. We don't want them using those senses. Their ears were serving them, they're running in, let's keep it going. So we want them to use the senses they trust. On stand setup, your shooting position, little things like if I can get on grass instead of gravel to be more quiet, make sure you're not skylighting yourself on a full moon. You'd be surprised when you look back at your stand. If the moon is behind you, you can skylight yourself in the dark. When I put my call out, I always look back and just try to see what I can see from that perspective. There is the call distance, how far the call is from your stand. It will kind of depend on that shooting distance that you're comfortable with. The further you can get the call from where you are is going to be beneficial for odor management, for sound. If you step and step on a twig, whatever makes some sound, that distance, that buffer zone is really going to help. But keep in mind that buffer zone is also going to increase your shooting arena. And then to wrap things up, how far you park. When you do this a lot, or at least I tend to get lazy. I'll find myself, I hunt out of a side-by-side. I find myself parking closer and closer and closer to where I want to shoot. Because when you do 6, 8, 10 stands a night, 6 nights a week, you just start to cut corners. I start to cut corners and don't walk quite as far. And then I get humbled on a stand where a coyote will come in, everything's great. He comes up over a ridge and then all of a sudden pops his head up, turns around, starts walking the other way. He saw my buggy, he saw a reflection, the moon reflecting off the glass, off the light bar, anything like that is going to make a big difference. So how far you walk, how far you go from, where you park the truck, all that kind of stuff makes a big difference. So this is part 1. Go to part 2. We're going to keep this series going on successful coyote setups. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks.